Racism. Racism! No matter where you go, racism is bound to be found in some shape or form. Every 14-year-old's favorite pastime on the internet and the basis for Twitter's and Instagram's algorithm. But what if I told you that there is a country in Europe where racism is a thing of the past? Where the CEO of racism got the Luigi Mangione treatment. A place that's also in Eastern Europe. No, wait. I'm actually serious. I'm talking about none other than Serbia. A couple of months ago, while browsing the internet, I stumbled upon this map from Radio Free Europe, which showcases the opinion of Europeans about people with darker skin. And let's just say the results were a bit surprising. Now, although Western Europe in general is known as a more progressive and liberal place, however, if a black person approaches a European coming the opposite way up the street, you can be certain that he is going to cross the street. While in Eastern Europe, they straight up put on the hood and light up a torch. Bruh. But in this sea of racism, there exists an island of anti-racism, of brotherhood and unity. That's right. I'm talking about none other than the ex-countries of Yugoslavia. Surprisingly, the Yugoslavs say no to racism and take a seat back in the Kochstuhl. And the biggest anti-racist of them all is none other than Serbia. And at first glance, you might be thinking this is some serious BS, considering what transpired in the Balkans in the 90s. And for the record, I'd just like to say that it's not racism if you do it to your own skin color. No black person ever called me Chetnik.
Zadom spremni, poglavnice.
If you're a person of color that's ever visited Serbia or have just started up a conversation over there about the topic of, well, black people, you've probably been surprised about the overall positive attitude and openness to talking about the subject. Hell, even abroad, a lot of my Serb friends who emigrated to America or went over there via a work and travel program made some of their best friends amongst the black community. So much so that they even got the coveted N-word pass. And you might be wondering, why is this the opposite of the case than that of like the rest of Europe? And one of the first reasons why is basically geography and exoticism. Now, Serbia is a small country that lies, well, in the, how should I put this? The appendix of Europe known as the Balkans, and right in the middle of there. And alongside this, Serbia doesn't really have the best of reputation because of, how should I put this? Some things that transpired in its recent history. As such, the country isn't on top of the bucket list of many tourists or travelers. So whenever a tourist does come to Serbia, it's often treated as like a blessing and a gift from God that, holy shit, someone came? Even in Novi Sad and Belgrade, which does see a, well, sizable amount of tourists compared to like the more rural places in Serbia, hospitality is still a huge thing. And if you're a foreigner, people will want to treat you and make your visit as comfortable as possible and showcase you the best of their culture, their country, and themselves. Now, amongst the tourists that do come to Serbia, usually they're, you know, the typical Euro that everyone sees. French, German, the British. You know, you see them all over the place, especially in Thailand. But when a black person comes to Serbia, they are genuinely shocked and stunned because they think like, what kind of misery brought you here, my guy? Like, if you're looking for the border with Hungary, it's over there. Now, with this, although a lot of Serbs don't like to admit it and will deny it vehemently, they are quite big fans of American culture. A lot of Serbs consume American movies, music, and watch American sports. I mean, you can't tell me that the NBA isn't absolutely huge in the country. Now, whilst consuming this type of American media, in it, they'll be exposed to black people and, well, black culture. And as there is so few black people in Serbia, naturally, a sense of curiosity and exoticism arises because, you know, it's completely foreign to them and it seems just something so far off and, you know, not really something most Serbs have ever interacted with. For example, I have a friend who by now is I think in his mid to late 40s. Him and I grew up in the same bum town in basically rural Serbia with a population of around 30 to 40,000 people. When he was a young Padawan in the early 2000s, him and his sister decided to take a trip to the lovely city of Novi Sad. When they arrived to Novi Sad, they decided to go into a bar and grab a drink. When they entered the bar and sat down, he saw a sight he had never in his entire life seen before. A black person drinking a beer, holy shit! And of course that was his reaction. He just turned towards his sister and went like... So naturally, he went up to the black guy and told him, Pato, but this is nuts! And then he said, Come, you must sit with us. You must meet my sister. Please talk to her. As you can imagine, the black guy he was pestering and his sister felt extremely awkward in this entire situation. I can't blame him, but at the same time, he was having the time of his life. You know, seeing a black guy drinking a beer, what more out of life do you want? Now, another thing that influences this positive opinion of black people in Serbia is, like I said, film, music, just general media, and sports. Now, I can't stress enough how big sports are in the country. Sports are big business. And you have Serbian players in all sorts of sports all over the world. In basketball, you have the GOAT Nikola Jokic. In tennis, you have the infamous Novak Djokovic. And in the European Football League, you'll find Yugoslav players sprinkled all throughout all sorts of different teams. They don't usually win, but you know, quantity over quality. Serbian men will watch sports games daily, and more often than not, they'll do so at a betting house. Yes, going sports betting is a daily tradition for a lot of Serbian men, and a huge social gathering overall. I mean, you'll see men and boys of all ages and sizes drinking a beer, smoking a pack of cigs, and yelling at a TV and being happy as a clam. As such, athletes overall are huge celebrities in Serbia. For example, when you apply to go to university in Serbia, a lot of universities will have, your typical entrance exams in physics, math, and whatever subject you really need. So you'll have several of these, but alongside that, you'll also have an entrance exam in general culture. Now, this exam gives questions that cover topics that range from geography, music, literature, film, and everything and anything in between. But most importantly, they'll also cover the topic of sports. Yes, whether or not you go to university can be decided based on the fact alone if you know who won the 1984 basketball championship. And because so many black people dominate in the field of sports, a lot of Serbs look up to them because of their athletic ability and their athletic accomplishments overall. And this is again because sports has such a strong grip over Serbian culture and Serbian society today. Another reason why Serbs have a positive opinion of blacks and Africans is the perception of solidarity and a shared struggle with them. The majority of modern African history is intertwined with the history of colonialism, foreign oppression, and slavery. Essentially, it can be summarized with the Europeans coming and colonizing their homelands with their own, basically selling them to the Europeans and being sent to work in the New World, after which came the strife for freedom and civil rights. Although not as extreme as African history, Serbian history also draws a lot of parallels with it. Since the 1400s, a similar time period when Africa was being colonized, Serbia too became colonized by a foreign power, the Ottoman Turks. Under the Turks, Serbs were essentially relegated to second-class citizens, with hundreds of thousands over the 500 years of Turk rule being turned into slaves via the devshirme system and being converted to Islam to basically, work as soldiers and build up the Ottoman Empire. Thus, many Serbs have this opinion that both them and the Africans were victims of colonial powers and their exploitation. Ultranationalist Serbs also have this view that America is inherently evil and just spreading evil all over the world, doing horrible things. During much of the early 20th century, black people within America were subject to basically being second-class citizens via the laws known as Jim Crow, which segregated them from white Americans. As such, they were forced to drink from different drinking fountains, not allowed to go into certain businesses, had to ride at the back of the bus, go to separate schools, and yada yada yada. Most of these, although in theory this separation was supposed to be separate but equal, it wasn't, and most of the resources were allocated to white Americans and not black Americans. Black people were relegated to essentially second-class citizens in the country. As such, these ultranationalist Serbs view the plight of African Americans as essentially proof of America's inherent evil, and they draw solidarity with them because they see themselves as also the victims of American aggression and American evil via the intervention in the Yugoslav War and the bombing of Serbia in 1999. Then throughout the rest of the 20th century, Yugoslavia, thinking that both sides of the Cold War were a bunch of retards, decided to fund its own bloc known as the independent movement. Now, the independent movement composed of Yugoslavia and a bunch of African nations, and today the movement is still active and encompasses more or less the entirety of Africa. During the time of Yugoslavia, and it being inside the independent bloc, Yugoslavia saw tight cooperation with many African nations, and there were a lot of student exchange programs with many African students coming to study in Novi Sad and Belgrade, hell, even in Niš. And even today, you'll see a lot of African students studying in Serbia, precisely because of this. As a result, this sort of similar history and this overall cooperation of not wanting to be involved in, well, the Cold War influenced the opinion of black people in the eyes of Serbs, where the Serbs were able to sympathize with the Africans, and most likely the Africans that came to Serbia and that became aware of Serbia's history and plight were able to also sympathize with them, as there are many parallels between African and Serbian history. They're broad, but still parallels. Now, this is all well and swell, but that's not to say that Serbia doesn't have its own problems when it comes to racial prejudice. A couple of months ago, on Instagram, a page known as Crnac Spotted popped up, which translates to Black Man Spotted. Now, this was a gimmick page that basically focused on photographing random black people in Belgrade and posting them. They would be photographed on the bus, walking down the street, in a restaurant, just minding their own business. Now, as autistic as this sounds, and, well, racially motivated, most likely it was made by a guy who came from a rural part of the country, you know, a student that probably moved over there to study, and was just fascinated by the exoticism and found, you know, the concept of black people and, you know, Serbia kind of funny, which, let's be real, when you have so many other prospering nations, why the hell would you come to Serbia, you know? It's a joke, okay? Please, slušajte me, molim vas, nemojte me zvati drugom Srbijanac, ovo je vic, brate. Ko će drugi nego svoj svoga? Now, this story made national news, sparking outrage across the country. Hell, even the state got involved with the state prosecutor threatening the guy to take off the page, otherwise the state itself was going to sue him for inciting racial hatred. So, although you'll have racially motivated incidents here and there, like everywhere else in the world, Serbia definitely doesn't have a history of racial prejudice and systemic racism, unlike many Western countries, which drive the opinion of black people in Serbia to a higher level. Overall, Serbs in Serbia see black people and Africans in a very positive light because they're able to sympathize and empathize with their history and look up to them because of their accomplishments in sports, music, and film. Now, of course, sometimes certain stereotypes do get propagated within Serbia, even though most of the time they are positive stereotypes. But if you're a black person or a person of color going to Serbia, don't take this as some sort of, well, microtransgression or some sort of mean-spirited remark. Usually, well, 99% of the time, it comes from a sense of curiosity and exoticism because, again, a lot of Serbs were never exposed to, well, people with a different background that's not from the Balkans or Europe. And yeah, that would be the story of racism in Serbia. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, as always, give it a like, and if you really enjoyed it, smash that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and it really helps me. And of course, let me know if you've ever had these types of interactions in Serbia. And if you're a black person or a person of color that's visited Serbia, please let me know down in the comment section, what was your experience visiting the country? Did you feel discriminated against? Did you feel accepted? What did you find weird? Please let me know. Anyways, my name is Janos and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, why are you